Hello, my name is Barney Frank, and I will begin with an apology. I had gladly accepted the invitation to speak to the APSA convention, and it is a profession that I was about to enter, 45 or so years ago, before I got, I thought, temporarily involved in a campaign for mayor of Boston. And it is one to which I hope to return in part, although in a less formal way than I might have otherwise. I do plan, after retiring in January, to spend a lot of time thinking and writing about various things, and including some teaching about the legislative process, which I believe can use some explication in some quarters that it doesn't get. I was therefore, as I said, eager to come, but I realized that I had not fully integrated this with the National Democratic Convention, especially after I was asked to serve on the platform committee. And it just was no way I could accommodate just having been married and wanted to spend some time with my husband, who's been a wonderfully understanding man, but still we did want some time to ourselves, and then make the national convention. I do want to emphasize this had nothing to do with any kind of boycott. Boycotts are legitimate. Sanctions are legitimate, but they are not either always good or always bad. I think a boycott of a political entity that's engaging in any LGBT activity or doing other things that's wrong can be very useful. But it is important on a case-by-case basis to make sure that you are aiming your attacks, your effort to inflict pain, on the people who are the decision makers. In New Orleans, given the very different nature of the political situation in New Orleans from the rest of the state, given the support, frankly, that people elected from New Orleans have given us on LGBT and related issues, given the fact that we have a population still struggling to recover from a national ignoring or underplaying of the great tragedy they suffered years ago, I did not think a boycott in this case was relevant. So that's not why I'm doing this, i.e. doing this by remote. I do want to congratulate you and thank you even more for this focus on discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. I first filed a gay rights bill, as we then called it, in 1972, when I first ran for the state legislature. I got to be the main sponsor by process of elimination. Questionnaire went out to people who were running for the legislature that year, and I was the only one who wrote back and said, I'll do it. In the 40 years since, I have seen an enormous amount of progress. Now, I always want to be clear. I'm not asking anybody to be grateful that there was less of a hateful prejudice than there used to be. There never should have been any. George Orwell, when he was shot in the neck during the Spanish Civil War and was told how lucky he was that he had survived being shot in the neck, said, well, I believe all those people who were never shot in the neck are even luckier than I. And that's the way I feel. But it's important to note progress so we can note how we are making that progress, and also because people in advocacy groups sometimes make the mistake of thinking you should always tell people things are not good, that if you begin to tell people that things are getting better or that we've had successes, they may slack off. That's a great error in terms of motivating people. People need to know two things. Most people, not people who are just by genetic makeup perennial activists. People, to mobilize large numbers of people, you've got to have them understand that there's a need for change, but also that there is the possibility of change. If people are always denigrating whatever victories we get, you can talk a lot of people out of even trying. We are, I believe, very close to abolishing legal discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity within the lifetime of even older folks like me. But it's not going to happen automatically. The zeitgeist is not self-executing. You've got to take advantage of it. And the way to do that is to press politically. First of all, the way to press politically is to accept facts. I wish, and this is the number one fact today about efforts to win our equality politically, there is no issue, literally no issue, on which the gulf between the parties is greater, with the possible exception of taxes, and even that may erode under the pressure of the looming sequester. The House voted on Thursday, July 20th, to reaffirm the Defense of Marriage Act with its denial of basic equal protection benefits to those of us who are in a same-sex marriage. The Republicans voted 230 to 5 for it. The Democrats 16 to 171 against it. I strike that, 17 to 161. 98% of the Republicans versus about 90% of the Democrats. Now, on the Democratic and Republican sides, that represents some movement. But on the Democratic side, it means we're getting better. On the Republican side, worse. And there have been people who said, oh, well, we're going to make sure that we work with the Republicans. Unfortunately, that hasn't been the case. And I speak now not as a partisan, but as a political scientist. A failure to analyze where the parties stand starts you off with a failed understanding of the situation, and then you can't go forward. What will happen this year, I believe, is that the LGBT issue will be overweighed by the economic issue. I don't think many votes are going to be cast one way or the other, given the overweening importance of the economic issue. But over the next few years, it's a powerful argument for us, namely to use the political process. And that's my major point, that there have been sort of contrasting views, demonstrations versus the political process. They're obviously not mutually exclusive, but they sometimes seem to me to be sort of temperamentally exclusive. And I think it is clear that the political process wins it for us. The prerequisite for that, of course, is that we're in the majority. We're in a majority that's increasing. More and more people now think we should be treated fairly. And as demographics move, it works in our favor. There are some issues where the young people are, maybe the more liberal they are, but they change as they get older. Everything I've seen suggests that the more enlightened attitudes, the anti-prejudice attitudes of younger people don't change as they get older, that the reality that they know that helped them defeat the prejudice does not get eroded later on. So the answer is to be political. And I have a speech that I make in these meetings. The time has come for people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender to simply demand of those close to us that they show us that they mean what they say. That is, there's been a tool track. I got a wedding present a week ago from a Republican member of Congress, and I was touched by that. That was very nice, and Jim and I enjoyed it. And then that member of Congress voted for the Defense of Marriage Act, and about 20 minutes before I sat down here, I returned the present. We've got to be intolerant of hypocrisy. We cannot let people, as people used to do in the South decades ago, patronize us, tell us how much they respect us as individuals, but of course they have to maintain institutional structures that diminish us. So we are on the verge, I think, of victory. And what you do in these cases, I read military history, is when you're about to win, you don't slack off. You press your advantage. I think we have the right to do that, and that means to impose ourselves politically by telling people that our votes are dependent on this. And in particular, I address this to my friends who want to be Republicans. Obviously, if people think that economic issues or environmental or foreign policy issues outweigh LGBT issues, then they may be voting Republican. But it's impossible to argue that voting Republican these days advances the cause. And what I would hope would be people would say to the Republicans, we are your natural allies. We agree with you on taxation and on climate change and how to respond to it. But we can't vote for you if you deny us our dignity. And that applies not just to those of us who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender, but people who themselves tell us they love us. And again, I understand the rules against partisanship. I don't believe this is partisan. It obviously has an effect of partisanship, but I also believe it's good analysis. The last thing I would add, some of you won't be surprised about this, but as a returning political scientist to others, let me share with you something, as I said, that probably won't surprise you. I am sitting in the basement of the U.S. Capitol. What you see over my right shoulder is a very good reproduction of the U.S. Capitol through the very good representation of a window. That is not the real Capitol. It is, I suppose, an example of the dwindling advantages of incumbency. I say dwindling advantages because people are mad at us, but at least we can sit in front of a picture of the Capitol and make people think they're seeing the real thing.